Xenia's stomach twisted. She pushed away from the dinner table. Chapter 6. The Forest Speaks.
The forest speaks.
The forest was as dark as Xenia remembered. A cold breeze
As dark as Xenia remembered. The cold breeze
bit at her skin. She shivered, pulling her coat up around her throat. She shined her flashlight. It barely lit up the forest floor in front of her. She stepped through the first row of trees. Dried leaves crunched loudly. "Zeph?" she called. "Where are you, Zeph?" "Zephyr!" The strange echo came again, bouncing around the trees. The sound sent chills racing up Xenia's spine. They made her want to turn around.
They made her want to turn around.
No, Xenia thought. Zeph needs me. She felt that in her bones. She continued forward. Sniff, sniff, sob. Xenia whipped around. A cry had come from the tree she just passed. Zeph? She leaned against the trunk. Nothing. Xenia swung her light up. A pained face seemed to be twisted into the knotted bark. Xenia blinked hard. Then she stared again. The face was gone. Get it together, Xenia, she told herself. Leaves rustled behind her. Who's there? She whispered, turning. The cold breeze ruffled the top of her hair. Something moaned. It was a deep sound, like a dead body stretching its limbs as it came back to life. Help me! Xenia heard the words as clear as day. It was not her imagination. It was her friend's voice. Zephyr, I'm here! Where are you? Xenia asked. She flashed her light all around. Help me! The voice was coming from deep within the forest. Xenia swallowed her growing fear. Her legs were wobbly, but she forced herself forward. Are you hurt? She called. Help! Xenia kept moving through the trees. A branch scratched her face. Another caught her sleeve. The trees were closer together now. Walking over their twisted roots became more difficult. I'm here! Zeph's voice shouted. The trees ahead were so close together, they were almost touching. Just beyond them, in a gap, Xenia saw something move. Zeph, is that you? She asked. Xenia squeezed between the trunks. The trees gave way to a small clearing on the other side. She waved her flashlight in a wide arc. Across the clearing was the rough bark of a twisted tree trunk. Right next to it stood a smiling girl. Zephyr. Chapter 7. Hunter. A moonbeam broke through the dense clouds overhead. It lit up the ground where Zeph stood like a spotlight. A huge grin spread across her pale face. Her loose red hair
A huge grin spread across her pale face.
fanned out and waved
Her loose red hair fanned out in waves
behind her.
You're
You're safe!
safe,
Xenia cried as she ran over,
She ran over.
but she stopped about 2 body lengths away.
2 body lengths away.
Something in her friend's grin froze Xenia in place. In the ghostly glow of the moon, the smile looked almost monstrous. Zeph stretched out an arm to Xenia and curled her fingers. A rustle rose from the forest floor. Xenia turned, shining her flashlight. Before she could move, a dark, thin shape shot out of the blanket of leaves. Xenia yelped as the thing wrapped around her right ankle. She saw it clearly now. It was a root sliding out from a nearby tree. Zeph, help me! She cried. Xenia dropped her flashlight. She tugged at the root with both hands. How was this possible? She thought. Then it hit her. Dad's story. The thing that grabbed him. Was it tree root? Zeph stood nearby. She was watching as if nothing unusual was happening. Don't fight it, Zeph said. It's no use. Xenia tried to dig her fingers into the space between the root and her boot. The root only wrapped itself tighter. What's going on, Zeph? Xenia pleaded. Why won't you help? You should have stayed away, Zeph said. Her voice sounded deeper somehow. I came to save you, Xenia said, still tugging at the root. Zeph laughed. It echoed off the trees. I gave you the chance to escape, but by coming back, you've sealed your fate. The root pulled suddenly, and Xenia fell. Oof! The air whooshed out of her lungs as she hit the cold dirt. The trees wanted you the first time we came into the forest. But I stopped them, Zeph went on. I thought we could have a few more adventures before they took you. I even thought about letting you go altogether. Then let me go now! Xenia cried. Her heart beat rapidly in her throat, and she could barely catch breath. I can't. You see, this forest and forests everywhere are dying, Zeph said, slowly walking over. Towns are being built where forests stood for thousands of years. Animals have left or been hunted to extinction. The soil has fewer nutrients. There's not enough to feed the trees anymore. That's awful, Xenia said. She tried to sit up, but the root tightened its grip as soon as she moved. But what do you or I have to do with it? Xenia saw pain in Zeph's
saw pain in Zeph's
eyes as she looked down at her.
I'm
a hunter, Zeph said. I help find food for the trees. Xenia let the words sink in. Wait, she said at last. So, I'm food for the trees? I'm sorry, Zeph said. I really did like you. Whoosh! Another root rushed out of the ground and wrapped itself around Xenia's wrist. She screamed.